Barrett realizes he needs to confront his band one last time. But how will he do that? He robs an ice cream truck, has a psychedelic experience, the lunatic is on the grass, and then it's time for the eclipse. Simple enough, right? Well, now it was time for the hard part.
Maximum effort.
In 1973, a London rock band by the name of Pink Floyd released what might be the single greatest album in human history. Nope, not that one. Dark Side of the Moon. The album was a psychedelic amalgamation of profound and existential topics such as time, money, mental illness, and what else? Oh yeah, life and death. Naturally, as a film fanatic, I felt the music deserved a video, and if nobody else would do it, then by God it would have to be me. Hello, I'm Zach, and you're watching Zach Makes Movies, the channel where we talk about...
You guessed it, Frank Stallone.
Today I want to talk a bit about my thesis film, along with all the challenges that came with it, in the hopes that anyone out there who's interested in film themselves has a courtside seat to the day-to-day and night-to-night of working on a short film. We'll take it step by step from the writing process to pre-production, casting, location scouts, all the way to the shoot and beyond. So crank up that dubstep and strap in for a journey back to a simpler time I like to call 2013.
You are now rocking with will.i.am and
Britney, bitch.
When I first decided to lose my mind making a short film. In the prior 2 years of film school, I'd made a metric shitload of shorts, including 2 main ones, A Little Bit Crazy, which went on to be my most successful YouTube video for a period of time, and Who Dates in College.
God! Oh, that's just go. Oh, Christ on a cracker!
Which also exists. But this was my mother effing thesis film.
You know what I feel like?
Oh yeah?
A mother effing beer.
I needed to step things up a notch. The most I'd ever spent on a short up to that point was about $500, and I knew this one would be about 10 times that, which posed an obvious challenge of its own.
Help me, I'm poor.
But we'll get to that. Before I could even think about money, I had to focus on step 1, writing the script. In screenwriting, a page generally translates to about a minute of screen time. So if I was aiming for a 15-minute short, I needed 15 pages. But not just any 15 pages, 15 perfect pages. This was it, my one shot, my last chance to use the expensive equipment my school provided, along with all the opportunities that came with it, before being tossed to the wolves of the real world.
Could you get the phone?
And start getting real.
The real world.
No, not that one, Jesus Christ.
Coming to bed, honey?
Yes, dear.
There we go. So, I began where all great stories begin, at the beginning of a mental breakdown.
I'm ready to go in, Coach. Just give me a chance.
Writing the first draft was easy, and frankly so was the second, and the third, and the fourth. It wasn't until about draft 13 that I started to wonder what the word draft even meant. Am I in a war?
War! We're in the midst of 2 wars all at once. Now the United States of America is engaged in both of these wars?
Time really is the biggest constraint in film writing. When you're starting out in features, that first draft can feel like a Herculean effort. But once the second draft comes around, it's an entirely different problem. Because you know what's easier than fixing an old scene? Adding a new one. Oh, your main character's taking too long to get to the inciting incident? Write another one. That'll fix the problem. In all seriousness, redrafting is a f***ing nightmare, and I don't wish it on my worst enemies. And the problem doesn't go away in short form. If anything, it's much, much worse. A problem that can be combated, and maybe even prevented, with a proper outline. And in the case of any and all subject matter that requires professional knowledge, a lot of prior research. See, my main character was based off a man named Syd Barrett, former member of Pink Floyd whose erratic behavior and deteriorating mental state led to his departure from the band, but whose creativity and enthusiasm inspired much of their later works, like Wish You Were Here, Shine On You Crazy Diamond,
Shine on, you crazy diamond.
which is an acronym for Sid if you leave out the O and the C. And last but not least, Dark Side of the Moon. I can remember one night in particular, tagging along with my producer Matt, who was editing through the night in the eerily empty production office of an associate of his. While Matt edited, I watched... God damn it, I hate that word. While Matt edited, I watched schizophrenia videos on YouTube for 9 hours, fueled by a perfect cocktail of joints and Adderall I call night coffee. That was the night I finally started getting somewhere with that script. I finally felt it was primed and ready to share with my highly discerning film class. The main problem was the structuring, and my professors knew that, and I knew that, and my classmates. The problem was this: I had lost my goddamn mind. Because there's just one little detail I forgot to mention about this period of pre-production. I had been listening to Dark Side of the Moon every single night for 6 months. I was completely obsessed with the idea of translating the beats of the album into the beats of the story. The only problem is, that's not how stories work. But I was blind to reality.
Did I stutter? I'm blind!
I refused to make the necessary changes, and I left the script as is. And this is the is that it was. The film opens over black. Sounds of a ticking clock, a heartbeat, a cash register bleed in. This is Speak to Me. Then we find ourselves in the office of a psychiatrist whose first words are,
breathe. Just breathe, Barrett.
Next, we go on the run with Barrett, who finds himself at band practice, only...
We're not having band practice today. But it's Tuesday.
Barrett confronts his ticking clock in an homage to time. Then he goes to the park to talk to an old man about death and dying in our rendition of Great Gig in the Sky. Barrett realizes he needs to confront his band one last time. But how will he do that?
Money. Are you an old sea captain?
He robs an ice cream truck, has a psychedelic experience, the lunatic is on the grass, and then it's time for the eclipse. Simple enough, right? Well, now it was time for the hard part. Step 2. Getting the money.
Get the money. Always remember to get the money. Never forget to always remember to get the money.
I'd never done crowdfunding before and was not particularly confident it would work. The options at the time were Kickstarter and Indiegogo. With Indiegogo, you keep whatever amount you raise, whether you reach your goal or not. But Kickstarter, while more popular than Indiegogo, required you to reach your goal or have all funds returned to the donors. It was risky, but I was banking on my project going viral.
Bug!
I set my goal for $5,000. I put together a solid pitch for the movie, complete with artwork and music. I threw together a quick video and sent it off. Now, to get a fundraising campaign to go viral, you pretty much need to get everyone you've ever known to pitch in within 48 hours or it'll fall off the first page of the site. Luckily, I know a lot of cool people, and within hours, friends, family, and friends of family were donating for small gifts and prizes like signed CDs, t-shirts, signed posters, and other items I forgot to factor into the budget. Within a few days, we'd reached 50% of our goal, and I spent every waking hour spamming the Kickstarter onto every Pink Floyd Facebook page, every YouTube video with relevant content, every nook and cranny I could find up the skirt of our beloved internet. And though the funds began slowing down after a few days, eventually we crossed the finish line and had our budget.
Mortimer, we're back.
Step 3. Pre-production. Okay, the script is done. I've got the money.
Always remember to get the money.
Now it's time to assemble the team. The best part about film school is that because we all needed crew on each of our films, we all had crew on each of our films. It was just a matter of figuring out the positions.
That's what she said.
No, but seriously, come on, this is serious. On every crew, you need a strong AD, or assistant director, someone to help run the set who knows the project as well as you do. In this case, there was only one person for the job, my producing partner, Matt Bailenson. Matt was always more geared to producing, and I was always more geared to writing, but we both wanted to be directors, so we had a good eye to help on one another's projects. As DP, or Director of Photography, I recruited my good friend Stephen DeKemper, who had always had a strong eye for visuals, and happens to be cool as f***, which is always good on a set. On sound, I put the legendary Tristan Simpson, the king of movie references. The first time I met Tristan, he was impressing a crowd at a party, naming the film that won the Oscar for any given year. But he's also one of the most responsible people I know, which made him perfect for the most important of tasks, sound.
Cousin, business is booming.
But then a friend from out of town offered to do it for 4 of the 6 days, so we swapped Tristan into an equally important role that he turned out to have a particular skill set for. Script supervisor. The script soup is in charge of continuity, among other things, involving,
You guessed it.
the script. Usually on set, the director won't have a ton of time to look through the screenplay. That's where the script supervisor comes in. Tristan would pay close attention throughout filming, catching any discrepancies between takes, whether in line delivery, or a flipped collar, or hair parted to the wrong side. Trust me, that shit will fuck you up in editing. Thank you, Tristan. As assistant camera, there was no one else I would dream of choosing than the other camera genius of the class. The man, the myth, Edgar Gonzalez Tornell. Edgar is the fucking man. We almost made a feature together called Fairly Normal Activity, foiled only by the harsh reality of the industry.
I had no money and I was broke.
Both?
Yeah.
As assistant camera, Edgar was often the actual cameraman, but was always focused on his main job. Focus. On Key Grip, we found a well-rounded filmmaker by the name of David Barkley, and under him I stuck my good friend Juan Pesquera and a guy named Shay. For combination makeup effects and production design, I hired my then-girlfriend, the talented Alexis Castillo, and doing set photography was our friend from the other film class, Claudia Leone. To round out the crew, we had Jenna Eisenberg as associate producer, and Dan Witkowski as a last-minute fill-in for Gaffer, as well as second AD, which we'll talk about a little later. And as the doctor said to Evel Knievel, now it's time for the cast. Matt and Jen and I auditioned probably about 500 people over the course of 2 weeks, meticulously taking notes on each and every candidate and narrowing it down to the best of the best. It was a long and difficult process, but ultimately, we got what we came for, in Andrew Baxter as Barrett, John Woodard as Dr. Robert, Cole Griffin as Gil, Daniel Robertson as Rod, AJ Hamilton as Mason, Samuel Culver as Rich, Thane Allison as John, Diane Hutton as Harmony, Zach Turnquist as Skeeter, Danielle Leahy as Crystal, Alec Barnes as Ringo, and Anthony Burns as Al. Now here's an inspirational story to all you actors out there. When I was casting the role of Barrett, I had a very specific image in mind, a skinny, long-haired Jim Morrison type. I was basically ignoring anyone with a buzz cut, and auditioned one long-haired freak after the next. There were a couple people who made some very interesting choices in the audition that I appreciate more now than I did at the time. But even more interesting was how the winner got the part. Andrew didn't have the look. He wasn't even in my top 100 list of people to bring in for the role.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
But before casting him aside, instead of in the movie, I noticed he'd sent an email to the production. It was paragraphs of gratitude for the opportunity, love and respect for Pink Floyd and Dark Side of the Moon, lists of his favorite bands from the era, an expression of his clear and total understanding of not only the character, but the story itself. So I said, fuck it. I moved his picture into the yes column and called him in to witness the best audition we'd gotten out of the bunch. Now, just as a little sidebar here, I thought I'd give a quick rundown of our equipment package, if you know what I mean. We were shooting on a Red Epic camera with some basic lenses and an additional lens package rented from another filmmaker. 2 Kino light packages, a spotlight, scrims, gels of all colors, boomstick, lavaliers, some higher quality audio recorder I don't remember the name of, dolly tracks, a dolly, a small jib arm, Apple boxes, and a ton of C-47s, aka clothespins. Now that we had the persons and the things, next we needed the places. That's right, you can't have a what without a where. This was the thing that had proved most treacherous in projects past: locations. What with high LA prices, including indie film studios that would charge more for a day than I'd allocated for a week, and costly permits necessary to legally film in the City of Angels, it was always a stressful endeavor. But this time, we had an idea called Airbnb. The idea was simple. Instead of looking for a psychiatrist's office in 2 different characters' homes, we'd find one house that could pass as all 3. That way, no company moves, no time wasted. After many days and nights scouring the site for the most efficient option, we finally found a spot in La Cañada Flintridge. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an office, a pool, nearly everything we needed, and we used every inch of it.
That's what she said.
I paid for the place, then arranged a video call with the owner, Athleen, to offer her extra money to let us film there. The next and even more difficult location was the concert venue. Enter producer Matt to the rescue with a genius plan to rent out a local church that we'd used in the past to shoot the classroom scenes in our web series Teacher's Lounge, which I'll talk about more in the future. The church was cheap, convenient, and to top it all off, there was already a full band's worth of equipment on the stage. It was kismet. We were on our way. But there was one location I wasn't sure we'd be able to find. A location that wasn't a location at all, but a vehicle. A picture vehicle, as they're called in the industry. buses, police cruisers, any specific car one might need for a film, a limo, a fire truck, or...
Can you put it in a bag? These pockets are really small. I have pants with bigger pockets, but I'm not sure where they are.
We found an ice cream truck online that allowed us to rent them out for regular price under the condition that we would be requiring no ice cream, and they came through. Only a few stories in specific stand out in my memory from this period of time. One was losing my gaffer 2 days before the project. I found him on Mandy, a film production site where he had agreed to come on for a few days for free. So I'm riding shotgun one day with Matt, going from Goodwill to Goodwill in search of props and wardrobe, when I get an email from the gaffer saying he got a paid gig and was going to have to bail on my project. I responded with mild frustration at the time, but soon after understood that he was doing what he had to do. It was just good business. The other pre-production memory is my crippling fear finally coming to a head. It was happening. The day was finally here. It was time to rent a U-Haul. Now, my fears of the U-Haul were not unfounded. There was a gentleman in my class who will remain nameless, who found himself transporting $100,000 of film equipment without insurance or the ability to avoid large, cumbersome objects. Nevertheless, I survived. And you will too. Alright gang, you've got your script, you got the money, and you've pre'd the production. Now the time has come to do the thing that all of this was always about. It's time to get on set. Step 4. Production. The night before our first day, I was up all night pacing around my living room like a madman with the script in hand, imagining every character and blocking out every scene in my mind. I went over my storyboard, I went over my shot list, I listened to the album again. The day came and it was time to make a movie. We decided to save our money and risk filming without a permit. Unless Film LA is watching this, in which case, that was a joke. This is a comedy channel. No, obviously we paid for the permit. Obviously. But if we hadn't gotten the permit, we would have been very nervous the whole time we were filming in a quiet neighborhood. Because part of the process of getting a permit for a residential area is going door to door, leaving a posting of the times and days you'll legally be filming in the area. If one were to not do those things, then one would have to make sure not to attract too much attention while filming, say from a dozen vehicles parked outside, or large suspicious crates being trafficked into their elderly neighbor's home, or a man in a beanie and gloves rigging a light through a window. The risk is simple. A neighbor calls the cops ask for the permit, we say we don't have it. I mean, I have it, I don't know where I put it. I'm sure it's in my file somewhere.
Hey, comedy, huh?
But here's the deal, folks. I know this all sounds like a lot, and the truth of the matter is this. It is. It's a f***ing lot, and we're not even halfway done. Challenges can pop up at any moment on a film set, but sometimes you get a gift instead. The plan for catering was to find some middling cheap company we could order hot meals of chicken and rice from, and counter that with cheaper but tastier meals such as pizza and lasagna, both of which are a terrible idea on a film set. But before we could, our newly hired actor, John Woodard, as he was wrapping for the day on his scene, mentioned in passing that he was a cook and a caterer on the side. He told us some of his recipes and the pricing was more or less the same, so we ditched the old plan and used his catering for the rest of the week, and it was by far the best food I've ever had on a film shoot, so shout out to John because food is the music of production. It's the most underrated element of the day. It can slow you down or it can speed you up and energize you for a productive day on set. As a wise man once said, "You don't want your crew to be sluggish. So if you save a bunch of money on food, great. You got everyone pizza, fantastic. But guess what? Now everyone's gonna fall the f asleep." So another thing that happened in the doctor's office scene is that we were pushed to our limits with respect to physical space. Steve was operating a small jib arm that took up the entire room, and in order to fit Edgar and our actors, everyone else had to step out, including me. I was relegated to behind the monitor in the next room over in what was the first and last time I've stepped out from behind the camera while directing. Seeing it on a monitor is fine, but you really need to be looking directly into the camera or at the actors themselves to know whether or not you can move on. Alright, so that was a couple small issues that can come up on set. Now let's raise the stakes. Day 3, the park scene. This was the day we shot both the ice cream truck and the old man sequence, in Griffith Park. For the ice cream truck, we shot toward the street. Then we turned around and filmed the other direction for the scene on the bench. The ice cream robbery went pretty smoothly. Zach and Danielle did a great job. Zach I worked with previously on Who Dates in College, along with Dan Hutton.
Oh, Alabama, huh?
I read one time somewhere that it's illegal to play dominoes on Sunday in Alabama.
That's weird.
Incest is legal, though.
Then came time for the old man scene, starring our talented friend Thane. It was an awkward enough scene to shoot already due to the dialogue.
But you're old. You're the closest one to death.
Yeah, you're ugly.
Some things are easier written than directed. That was one of them. But that was the point of the scene. Barrett is confronting his own mortality. It just made sense for him to be interacting with an older man, and speaking very flippantly to him. The problem was, our actor couldn't remember his lines. You know, the lines about him being old as shit? So I don't think that helped. But basically we're going in circles again and again, trying to get the lines out of him.
Here we go.
Baked on a buttery, crispy crust.
Baked in a buttery, flaky crust.
Baked on a buttery, crispy crust.
Finally, we decided to just write his lines down on cue cards and do it piece by piece. Though, frankly, looking back, I would have gone a different route and let them improvise a scene instead.
Baked in a buttery, crispy flake.
You have to be willing to throw everything away on the day if you really want to make real art.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Another hurdle we ran into is every director's worst nightmare. Well, not the worst one, but the second worst. An actor not showing up on set. On one of our last days, we were shooting in a second Airbnb, this one much smaller and with many more cast members. Everybody had arrived on set except for Cole, the actor who was playing Gil in the movie. Cole had misread the call sheet and missed our call time, and when I got him on the phone, he wasn't sure he could make it to set. But I told him the truth. He was the star of the scene we were about to shoot. Everybody else was there, and the scene doesn't work without him. We don't mind waiting, but we need him to get his ass to set as soon as possible. And to his credit, he did. And we got the scene done. Cole did fantastic work on the film, as did my pal AJ, former wrestler Sam Culver, the always reliable Daniel Robertson, and of course, our star, Andrew Baxter. Now before we get to the last and biggest nightmare of the shoot, I want to talk about a different day. The big day. The concert. The concert was the money shot. It was all or nothing. Whether or not we pulled it off would make the ultimate difference in the project's overall success. And in order to pull it off, we needed 3 things. Number 1, we needed about 40 extras to play the concert crowd. Number 2, we needed someone to help wrangle the 40 extras. And number 3, we needed help rigging the lights. Professional help. So we called in a man by the name of Rick Greenwood. Rick was a camera and lighting specialist who worked at New York Film Academy. Every now and then we'd fill out a red card and have a one-on-one meeting with one of our professors. So we asked Rick if he'd be available on concert day to help hook us up, and in exchange we'd fill out a bunch of red cards and get him paid through the school. Rick came through in a big way, setting us up for success in ways we would never have figured out had it not been for him. On the day of filming, I had 2 scenes to shoot at the location. The concert scene, which would be upstairs, and the backstage before the concert scene, which we were shooting in the basement. I, unfortunately, couldn't be in 2 places at once. So we decided to leave Rick and Steve in charge upstairs to figure out lighting and shooting, while Edgar and I shot the other scene down in the crowded basement. I moved around rapidly, resetting the room for better aesthetics while Edgar figured out lens options. Anthony Burns, who was playing the security guard, was lifting sandbags to warm up for the camera, and soon enough we were ready to rock. We got through the scene with relative ease, and I made my way upstairs to find the most beautiful stream of viridescent light shimmering down from the rafters to reflect off our valiant hero, Rick. It was a sight to behold, topped only by what I was met with next. People poured into the church like people in a church, only these people weren't looking for salvation. They were looking for $20, which was all we could afford for the hour or so of shooting when multiplied 40 times. Strangers of all shapes and sizes, colors and creeds came together from the deepest depths of Craigslist for a chance to be in a movie, and they were beautiful. I knew I'd need a powerful voice to be the bad cop and keep the unruly mob in check between takes, and there was only one man for the job, Dan Witkowski. Dan had exactly the level of unchecked ego and Polish sensibilities to control the crowd, telling them when to shut the fuck up so I could direct the main cast in their final scene. Fortunately, it all went perfectly to plan. The crowd overall killed their small performance, and Dan handed out the payment 1 person at a time on the way out. Everything went relatively smoothly across the board from the beginning to the end of the shoot. When you're dealing with this many variables, this many people, this many locations, this much equipment, in this small of a time frame, not to mention factoring in LA traffic and any emergencies that can arise at any time, It's not uncommon for things to go wrong. And while we did have a few issues here and there, I was extremely relieved by the end of the shoot. That is, until our last night at the Airbnb. It was right out of a movie. 4 days of successful shooting as I stayed up stressed about 100 things that didn't go wrong. All these crew members in the crowded house, some of whom I didn't know at all. And on the last night, the person I deemed most trustworthy and responsible out of the entire crew walked into the kitchen with me to discuss the script. A simple scene we were filming in the next room over in a few minutes. Tristan asked something about the next scene and I gave him an answer, probably in a Scottish accent, something hilarious. And ever so gently, he set his elbow to the electric glass stovetop. His elbow went right through, smashing the stovetop and scaring the shit out of everyone in earshot, most particularly me. We were so close. So close. Tristan was bummed. He started talking about paying for it, and I told him to shut the fuck up. This was my film, and this was on me. I wasn't about to make my unpaid crew member pay for an accident, no matter how expensive. How much is that shit?
Oh no!
Hey, Tristan! No, this was on me. I had to call Athleen and tell her exactly what happened. But not tonight. Tonight, we finish the film. Then we get those last few shots tomorrow morning, and I make the call. The dreaded call. Boy, was I dreading that call. But I had to do it. I picked up the phone, I clicked the speed dial, top 5 friends, boom, there she was, and I called the homeowner. My heart was pounding as the little old lady picked up the phone. She asked how everything went, and I told her it was perfect. I'm basically the greatest director to ever live, and she's going to make a fortune selling house tours to tourists when I'm on the front cover of Time magazine. But enough about my criminal ambitions. I told her what happened. I told her we broke the stove. I said we crashed right through it. Not me, but somebody. And she said, "Oh no, that was like that already." Folks, it wasn't. It was the perfect out, but I couldn't do it. I said, "No, I don't think it was this bad before." My script guy elbowed it like the great Kali. Still, she insisted that's what it was like. So, I guess the pieces were just placed back together and we hadn't noticed the crack? I don't know. I wasn't about to talk her into letting me buy her a new stove. But my conscience was cleared and my concerns were massively alleviated. And there it was. The movie was in the can, as they say. Whatever you want to call it, it was done. We did it. We made it through the shoot. Now, it was time to rest. I'm kidding. That wasn't even the halfway point. In fact, in terms of total hours spent on the project, the shoot wasn't even 2%. Less than milk. And no section of filmmaking requires more hours than what I was about to embark on next. Step 5, post-production. I don't know how much there is to say about the editing process. It's pretty tedious. It always starts the same. Syncing the video to the sound using the clapboard, then systematically choosing the best takes for every scene you shot. Once I've done that, I like to grab each of those winning takes and throw them onto the timeline in order. This includes multiple angles with the same dialogue repeated throughout. Then I go through the angles and decide which ones I want where, and bounce back and forth between them in as natural a way as possible. I typically get through the first cut within 24 hours. It's one of the only periods of my life that I can go a day without eating, without standing, without walking away from the screen. Because there is nothing more engaging, more addicting, more intoxicating than seeing your script truly come to life for the very first time. And then comes the hard part. Multiple months of days-long edits, chopping, deleting, recreating, moving and removing, finalizing the picture, fixing up the sound, smoothing out any pops or drops, adding in sound effects in every scene, sometimes hundreds or thousands in total, and playing with that for days on end. Then comes color correcting, which can take 100 hours on its own, depending on your skill level. Mine at the time was 0. By the end of the project,
double it!
Finally, I was finished. The edit was complete. Picture was locked, sound was fixed. There was only one last piece of the puzzle. And it's always an important piece of the puzzle, possibly, I believe, the most important. But on this project, it wasn't just important. It was the final determining factor of the movie's ability to appropriately honor the greatest rock album of all time. But who could take on such a task? Who did I know who could do this? I'd never worked with a composer before, and I certainly didn't know who I trusted with this particular material. Or did I? In film school, I met my producer Matt, through whom I met his friend Nemo, through whom I met his now wife Kamea, and through Kamea, I met a musician by the name of Nick Hill. Nick Hill had a band called Dream Alive that played progressive rock in the tone of Journey meets,
You guessed it,
Pink Floyd. We'd all gone to a bunch of his shows in 2012 and 2013, and I was a fan instantly. Nick wasn't just singing and playing piano, he was writing everything. He was composing the band. Nick and I became fast friends, and soon I learned he was composing short films, so I knew he'd be perfect for the job. I hired Nick Hill and sent him the cut, which was about 15 minutes exactly, and within a week he had sent me back tracks for every scene in the movie. We discussed a few ideas previously and landed on the same page that we needed to emulate the tracks from the album as much as possible while at the same time making an original soundtrack. So he sends me the first draft and I come up with my notes and we meet for coffee going over what is working and what isn't working. That night he went home and finished every track like the maniac he is. And finally, the movie was done. Step 6. Screenings and film festivals. I was very fortunate in that our graduating class was allowed to screen our thesis films in a full theater on the Warner Brothers backlot, and that's where we premiered Dark Side of the Moon. Pretty crazy to think they'll release a bunch of student shorts, but they won't release their own goddamn movie. But that wasn't the end. Next was the festival circuit. There was only one problem. I was out of money. I scraped together little bits here and there and sent the film off to a small handful of festivals, mostly local, and we got into the Los Angeles Film and Script Fest where we screened again, followed by a Q&A, which was a bitchin' time. Aftermath. In the end, I was relatively happy with my film and proud of our efforts. I sent out our digital scripts and private links to the movie, gave special thanks to all our donors in the credits, and printed out 100 copies of the film poster which I had the cast and crew sign. It was later left in the back of my totaled Kia Rio, but that's a story for another time. The biggest lesson in the end was that I should have factored post-production, marketing, festivals, and shipping and printing costs on the rewards into our budget before setting the bar lower than we needed. But what can I say? I was 20. I didn't know a f***ing thing. I like to think my Dark Side of the Moon is a decent thesis film, but you'll have to be the judge for yourselves. The movie's currently available in the My Movies playlist on my channel, along with all my shorts, including Crow's Creek, Who Dates in College, and A Little Bit Crazy. Thank you to everyone who watched to the end. Subscribe for more content like this, and let me know in the comments what you want to hear about next. Until next time.
That's a lovely accent you have. New Jersey?
Austria.
Austria? Well then, good day, mate.